received requests from several members of the congressional delegation to meet with us. Given the pressures on their time and our time, we've arranged for 3 of them to do so by brief videotapes, which we will play in a moment here. And one has provided a letter. Let me read the letter. It's from Senator Hutchison, whom I had the occasion to meet with a few weeks ago about this project. And her letter goes as follows. Mr. Chairman and members of the Human Spaceflight Review Panel, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide a statement in this hearing to underscore the importance of NASA to Texas and the need for minimizing the space gap. You have a huge challenge and a critical responsibility, and I appreciate your willingness to hold a hearing in Texas. The possible 5-year gap in manned U.S. space launches between the planned retirement of the Space Shuttle program next year and the earliest possible inauguration of the new Ares rocket and Orion crew capsule in 2015 could have potentially devastating effects on Texas. NASA has long been a central component of my state's growing tech industry. The Johnson Space Center in Houston is a premier NASA center for the International Space Station and human space flight, scientific and medical research efforts. The JSC directly employs over 3,400 civil service and more than 13,000 contract employees. In total, the JSC supports the Houston area by generating an economic impact of over $4 billion and 35,000 jobs. The potential loss of this workforce's skills during the transition has long-term implications for Texas and its continued support of space flight programs. This was outlined clearly in the Rising Above the Gathering Storm report to Congress. The 2005 and 2008 NASA Authorization Acts reflect broad bipartisan, bicameral support for the U.S. human spaceflight programs. More specifically, both bills express support for the goal of returning to the moon to conduct the kind of sustained human exploration that was not a program. They express support for completing the International Space Station and making the maximum possible use of its laboratory facilities for microgravity research across a broad range of scientific disciplines. The 2005 Act designated the space station as a national laboratory and began its evolution to a facility that not only can meet NASA's research needs, but those of other government agencies' educational consortia research and development concerns. In fiscal year 2008, NASA worked with 63 universities and educational centers in Texas to provide grants, contracts, and commitments valued at approximately $51 million. Beyond the looming space gap, one of the questions the panel has been charged with addressing is the question of continuing space station operations beyond 2015. I want to be very sure that the panel understands that the Congress has expressed itself clearly in the reauthorization law passed last year, that it considers full and extended utilization of the space station to be a critical necessity. In the 2008 Act, the Congress directed NASA to take no action that would preclude operations of the space station beyond 2015 for at least 5 years to 2020. We then required NASA to provide a report to Congress due July 15, 2009, 2 weeks ago, outlining the specific plans and requirements needed to support operations, maintenance, and full utilization of the ISS as a national laboratory through at least 2020. I'm advised that the required report has been completed and the final draft has been under review at NASA headquarters for the past 2 weeks. It then must be reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget, and my office has been assured that OMB has agreed to expedite that review. I underscore the pending availability of this report today because it should contain, if it is responsive to the requirements of the law, the type of information this panel must have if it is to adequately address the issue of space station operations beyond 2015. My staff has advised NASA that the information comprising the content of this report should be provided to the panel, and I believe this could and should be done immediately, regardless of whether the report has been finalized prior to formal presentation to the Congress. Congress, in turn, needs the information in this report to help us craft a new NASA authorization bill, which we have been working on this past several months. A portion of that bill will address the space station utilization issue by taking the evolution of the national laboratory concept to the next steps of formal organizational developments and providing the authority necessary for it to effectively operate. I will continue to press for the timely submission of the formal report, but bring it to the attention of the panel as something I believe they need access to now, if they have not already been provided all the factual data used in preparing the report. Finally, I want to stress my belief that you must be able to consider any and all possible options and alternatives to ensure the continuation and future success of the U.S. human spaceflight programs. I believe it is essential for your review to be unconstrained by any binding consideration, whether budgetary or programmatic. We in the Congress, and I believe that administration, must be given a clear picture of what is attainable and what resources would be required. We will then be in a position to make the judgments necessary to achieve the best possible and most affordable result for the American taxpayer. Again, I want to thank you for coming to the great state of Texas and your commitment to this enormous task. I look forward to seeing the results of your efforts. I commend you for joining with the administration and my colleagues in the Congress to derive the best possible path forward to sustain an essential national asset and preserve our country's leadership in space. And it's signed by Senator Hutchison. The next input we received was from Senator Cornyn. And if we have that on a videotape, if we could play that, please.
Hi, I'm United States Senator John Cornyn. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on the importance of our nation's human spaceflight program and what the future holds for it. Earlier this month, we marked the 40th anniversary of NASA's ingenuity in successfully landing astronauts on the surface of the moon. Since that milestone, human spaceflight has remained a source of inspiration and wonder for generations of Americans, and I believe it's vital to our security and prosperity on multiple levels. I welcome the Human Spaceflight Plans Committee to Texas, home of Johnson Space Center, which is the heart of our nation's human spaceflight program. Its storied history is known, but I believe the best is yet to come. I thank the committee for holding today's public meeting. By meeting with NASA employees, contractors, and community members, the committee will be able to fully appreciate how much the Johnson Space Center and human spaceflight has contributed to our understanding of the universe we live in, and how human space missions will play a critical role in furthering discovery and scientific research as our nation looks to explore further and go back to the moon and even on to Mars. Space exploration has contributed to many notable achievements in development in technology and science. Things like GPS navigational systems and satellite technology would not be around today if not for NASA research and innovation, as well as the life-saving medical advances like the artificial heart. I hope the work of this commission recognizes the years of development and planning that has gone into the bold vision laid out for NASA and encourages the new administration to strongly embrace those goals going forward. It's essential that at the end of this process, the Commission and the administration send a strong message of support for human space exploration to lay the groundwork for our nation's continued success in space. For my part, I pledge to do all I can to support the nation's space program and the hard work being done by the men and women of the Johnson Space Center, because this program is important not only to our nation, it's important to Houston and one of the greatest sources of pride for all Texans.
Let's see, we also have a video that was provided by Congressman Olson, if we could play that at this point.
Mr. Augustine, members of the Review panel, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I sincerely apologize that I could not be with you in person, but appreciate the opportunity to submit this tape to you. I would have preferred to be there. We were wrapping up the appropriations process and debating health care reform on the floor. Thank you so much for coming to Houston and for holding this public meeting. Your initial schedule didn't indicate such a forum, and I appreciate you considering my request and subsequent decision to come here. You do not have the time, and there is not enough tape for me to herald the achievements of the Johnson Space Center and the aerospace community in Houston. I am so proud to represent the men and women of the 22nd District in the U.S. Congress. To me, the Johnson Space Center is a shining example of the past, present, and future of space exploration. The men and women who work at JSC are the best in their field, but make no mistake, that excellence is not limited to within the walls of JSC. One of the things that should be a shining example across the nation is the partnership between JSC and its contractors. The working relationship between civil servants and private contractors is a critical one that needs to be cultivated as we harness the abilities and funding from different avenues to achieve our common goals. And let me be perfectly frank with you all. It is not an understatement to say that the world is watching the work of this commission. The public is watching. The blogosphere is watching. And I can assure you, Congress is watching. The options you provide will be the guiding force for our human spaceflight program for a generation or more. I understand you are looking at technical aspects of our current program. I am not qualified to speak of those, except to say that if you told the men and women in the hall today that all they had was an old telephone booth, duct tape, and a box of matches, they could get it to the booth, and you'd have a line of folks willing to ride it there. These are the men and women who fit a square peg into a round hole on Apollo 13. My primary focus is on the budget challenges and overall mission for our nation's human spaceflight program. I fundamentally believe that the path we are on is the right one. President Bush announced in 2004, and President Obama endorsed during the campaign, a human spaceflight plan that I feel is the proper way to go forward. This is a twofold question of funding and mission. As I've said, I believe we have a defined mission, and it's one I hope in Congress and in the media. Our nation must begin exploring beyond low Earth orbit again. We celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission last week. Where will we be 40 years from now? Apollo will be in our history books forever. But if in 40 years all we have is grainy footage from the Sea of Tranquility, we will have failed at our responsibilities as an exploring nation. I've been in Congress for 7 months now, and we have spent money at a mind-boggling rate. There are those that have suggested that NASA needs a bailout. I don't hold to that terminology, because NASA doesn't need money for something it has done wrong or failed to do. It doesn't need to be bailed out. It needs to be invested in. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The problem facing our human space program is not a vision problem. It's a commitment problem. Help us make the case for that national commitment that we need. The men and women who are at this hearing, both those that you will be hearing from, those in attendance, and those watching or following, have a deep and abiding interest in what NASA is doing. We need to translate that interest to our neighbors, to those districts without a center in them, and to those who are skeptical and think NASA's best days are behind it. What you're discussing is not a JSC pet project or the direction of one federal agency. You are laying out a pathway that will lead to scientific discoveries, the creation of thousands of good-paying jobs, a means to inspire youth to become engineers, and the not-so-little principle that great nations explore. Your task is not enviable in a lot of ways. It is difficult and has far-reaching consequences. But if you want inspiration as to how to achieve seemingly impossible tasks, you once again made the right choice to come to Houston and talk with the people from the Johnson Space Center. Thanks again. I stand ready and willing to help you all.
And we have an input also from Congressman Culberson.
I'm Congressman John Culberson. I'm delighted you're at the Johnson Space Center. Sorry I can't be there in person, but Congress is voting today. And I want to urge you in the strongest possible terms to recommend full funding for a robust manned space program that is proven to be so vital to the success of the United States as a world leader in the spin-offs in technology, in the advancements in rocket propulsion, in aviation, in aeronautics, and so many ways, the manned space program has been vital to our success as a nation, but I think the most important contribution that the manned space program has made to America is the inspiration that our astronauts and engineers and scientists provide to the human spirit. And there's no substitute for touching the human heart to inspire people to achieve above and beyond what they think they can do. And hard to imagine where America would be today but for the Lewis and Clark expedition. My hero Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and Captain Clark out into an unknown wilderness and just over 200 years ago to bring back specimens of animals and plant life and meet new civilizations and go where no man had gone before. And that role of the explorer is one that has always touched the American heart and inspired us as a country, lifted us up 200 years ago, lifted Americans up over our entire history to travel out west to settle new frontiers. And it is something that we as people are genetically I think, wired to be leaders and explorers and innovators in America. And the manned space program is the linchpin of American innovation. It embodies the American spirit of exploration and innovation and does more, I think, than any other endeavor in America to touch the hearts of young people and lift them up and inspire them. So because of the practical, economic, technological, scientific, and all those other tangible, important spin-offs that we benefit from as a nation to increase productivity, to make us more successful as a nation economically and scientifically, the medical advancements, all of those things are vitally important reasons that you should recommend a robust and fully funded manned space program out into the 21st and 22nd century. But more than any of those reasons, I hope you'll recommend as a commission to fully fund our space program because of the incalculable effect on the human heart and the inspiration that it has provided to me as a native Houstonian, to so many other young people that touched our hearts. If I weren't so flat-footed and bad at mathematics, I'd have applied to be an astronaut and wanted to become an astrophysicist or an astronaut as a young man growing up in Houston and West University. The Gemini program, the Apollo program, the MAN program has truly touched my heart and continues to inspire me and admire me immensely. We have an obligation as a Congress, as a country, to stand behind our astronauts and our space program and to support them proudly. Where would the Hubble be without the manned space program that could go up and repair them? We would have lost Skylab. The stuck solar panel had to be repaired by a spacewalk, and the innovation and determination of astronauts who figured out a way to tie themselves off so they could break loose that stuck solar panel. We would have lost Skylab. We would have, I can't imagine what would have happened to Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong on the moon if they hadn't had two astronauts there using their own creativity when they broke the switch on the ascent engine. That Buzz Aldrin had a felt tip pin with him that they were able to jam in and arm the engine to get off of the moon for our first lunar landing. And of course Neil Armstrong was able to fly past the field of boulders in the crater to find a safe landing spot. It is absolutely essential that we have a robust, fully funded manned space program. Robots can't do it all. They can't think for themselves, and you're so far out in space with a lag time between the time the transmission leaves the spacecraft and back to the Earth and then back. You must have a human being there to make these decisions. And sadly, the previous administration made bold recommendations for the space program, got all our expectations up, and then never recommended adequate funding. And so it's essential not only that you recommend a robust manned space program, but that you insist that Congress and the administration fully fund it. Never again should we ever lift up the hopes of these wonderful men and women at NASA and people all over the nation that we're going to go to Mars or go to the moon or set some big goal for the space program and then not fully fund it. Help give us that challenge to set the goal. My personal opinion, I think it's essential. We go to the moon. It's only 3 days away. It's a shallow gravity well. A lot of natural resources there that we can tank up and use to carry us on to the next step and to sustain a lunar station there. The moon is as essential a destination as was the space station in low Earth orbit. We've got to have it there as a waypoint to go beyond and help develop the technology needed to go beyond. So I am grateful to you for your commitment and support to the space program. Glad you're at the Johnson Space Center, these magnificent men and women who are so committed to technological excellence, to carrying us on to the next frontier, to boldly go where no man has gone before, to reach out and touch the face of new worlds and one day new civilizations. That is all possible if you will make the recommendation to give us a clearly defined goal to go to the moon and beyond, to have a manned space program that is fully funded. We will meet the challenge. We'll make that commitment as well in Congress, and I'm confident the administration will do the same. Now, thank you very much for being here today at the Johnson Space Center. Again, I'm sorry I can't join you, and Godspeed and good luck to you in your recommendations, and you can certainly count on me. That's why I asked to serve on the NASA Science Subcommittee on Appropriations, although I say no to virtually all spending requests unless it's medical, scientific, or the space program or national defense. This is a great passion of mine. It's essential for the survival of our nation, for the human heart, and for the American spirit that we have a manned space program that's fully funded and robust. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope I get to meet you personally.
Well, I should thank each of the members for their submissions and appreciate their understanding of our schedule and their schedule as well. I should probably also say that on behalf of my colleagues, I've met with a number of other members of Congress about our work and have received a lot of very good advice.